Income Tax 2020, Practice Problem 1, Presentation 25, Gifts to Charity, Tax Formula with an Excel worksheet. Come in, relax with Income Tax 2020. Here we are in our Lacerte tax software. You don't need the Lacerte tax software to follow along. However, I do think they have a 30-day free trial. So if you can get access to a promo or demo version of it or any other tax software, it could be a good tool to practice with. In prior presentations, we've been working in on our comprehensive practice problem 1. In the first section, we entered data related to the total income, then focused in on the above-the-line deductions, also known as adjustments to income, to get down to our adjusted gross income. Now we're looking at the standard deduction or itemized deduction. We are at this point taking the itemized deductions, it being bigger than the standard. We're going to be focusing in on the charitable contributions. We entered it into the tax software to the forms last time. Now we want to enter it into our Excel worksheet, into the formula worksheet. Let's just kind of recap what we entered last time so we could see it in both sides. Our goal here is to take as much information as possible from the source document to enter both into the tax software and into the Excel worksheet so that we could double check our work and have that double checking, as well as the tax formula in the Excel worksheet being the easiest way for us to visualize the overall work and therefore be able to see what the impact of different changes will be just by looking at and visualizing that formula. Okay, so last time we went to the Schedule A. We went down to the gifts to charity. Now we already had the 500 in there. The 500 was in there because we had an above-the-line deduction before we thought about being able to itemize, and we entered that charitable contribution. So we got the cash contributions have already been input, but obviously in practice, if they had not been input, the client would have to provide that to us. So we would need a list of the charitable contributions that were cash contributions that would be qualified. And then they might have non-cash contributions, which can be a little bit more complex as well. The client often providing something like just the receipt from the charitable organization, possibly like Goodwill or something like that, which will basically give you the address of the organization and the information related to the organization, as well as the date of the contribution and the items like 10 bags of clothes or something like that, or household goods or whatnot. What they will not typically do is give you the fair market value at the point in time of contribution, because they're not like a thrift shop. They don't really know what that is. That's what you're going to kind of have to estimate. So oftentimes what you'll have is you'll get that information. Then you'll have your open item over here saying, hey, could you tell us what the actual amount, we need to estimate the amount of the goods that you gave to charity was. And the question will be, I don't know how much it was. Well, how much do you think you paid for it? And then how much do you think would be a fair, thrift shop value based on that? You might have some kind of standard that you're basically using for a standard item like household goods or clothes or something like that you can basically be working with. But no matter what you do, it's some type of estimate. If it's a large item, then you might have an appraisal on it or something like that. But that's going to be our 1,000. So if I enter that into our Excel worksheet, then we're looking at this line item, the itemized deductions. If we had charitable contributions and we're not itemizing, in other words, the standard deduction being bigger than the itemized deductions, then we may get basically up to the 300 that we can take up top in the above the line deduction, which would be here, which we had before in the charitable contributions limited to the 300. If, however, we have the itemized deductions which are greater than the standard deductions, we may be able to take more of the charitable contributions and not be limited to simply the cash contributions, but possibly also property contributions. That's where we're going to go now. We're going to go to the Schedule A. So Schedule A, we're going to go down to the contributions, and then I put clothes here, but this is, I could say, non-cash items. And then I'm just going to put in here what we believe the value is to be. I'm not going to put all the other information that you might need on the tax return, which would be what was the organization, when was it contributed, and that you might want to put that information into here. But really, I'm kind of concerned right now just simply with the calculation to make sure the calculation is correct. It's up to you as to how much data input you want to double up. I'm really just kind of focused in on the numbers here, and I'm dependent a little bit on the software to tell me if I'm missing some informational things, such as the date that the contribution was made, or if I miscalculated the date, if I said it was made next year or something like that. The software will then either not include it or tell me, hey, you messed up the date, or you didn't put the date, or you didn't put the address. So I'm kind of dependent on the software for that. I want to get the numbers right here. In any kind of filing requirements, the software will typically help because it won't let you e-file it unless you have that information. This information, again, would have to come from the client. It's not going to be a W-2 or like a 1099 type of form. It's not going to be as concrete as you would have for the income, but you should have at least, some information indicating what was given. And then again, you typically have to follow up to get the added information oftentimes. So that's going to then add up down below. If we add all this up to the 29,962, does that tie out to what we have over here? 29,962, it sure does. And then if we go back to the first page of the 1040, in our case back to the formula up top, we have the 81,030 in the income. Above the line deductions, the 15,600. We have the adjusted gross income, or AGI, 65,430. Then we're taking the greater of the itemized or standard deduction. Standard deduction for a married filing joint would be 24,800. The itemized deduction is larger, the 29,962. And just realize how much of a difference that is. Notice if I take the difference between these two, that's really only a difference of 5,162, and that's more people are not itemizing as much because the standard deduction has been increased, which is kind of good because that means everybody gets basically a higher just baseline deduction. But also note that if you're talking to someone like purchasing a house and thinking about the mortgage interest and whatnot, if they say, hey, look, your mortgage interest, if you buy the house, you're going to get to deduct the interest on it. So yeah, you're paying $16,000 of interest, but you get this huge deduction that no one else has the ability to take. But just realize that huge deduction included with all other itemized deductions isn't $16,000. It's only really given a benefit over the standard of the $5,162. Now that might change next year because they could wipe out all the changes to the taxes, and then that could change the standard deduction and make all the itemized deductions more valuable. But just realize that you got to keep that in mind when you're doing like advice or something to someone asking for tax advice and this and that. You want to keep in mind what the actual value is of the itemized. And we're going to take the itemized deductions because they're greater than the standard, but that doesn't mean we're getting 29,962 of benefit because we would have got 24,800 anyway. In any case, that's going to give us our taxable income of the 35,468. And then we're going to go down here and let the system do the calculation. So let's check that number, 35,468. Is that what's on the tax return? 35,468 checks out. Check. Put a green check by it to show that it checks out. And then I'm going to let the tax return do the tax calculation at the 3,706. So I'm just going to plug that in here, 3,706, 3,706. And the 8,000 is what was withheld, bringing our refund at the 4,294. So we're going to scroll down. We got the 4,294. That ties out, and so it looks good thus far.